Alright, welcome back to Assassin's Creed 3. We're gonna jump in learning about Thomas Paine right away. We ended up leaving Achilles in a little bit of a heated argument. But while we were leaving, we ended up getting the pop-ups for database entries. And our first one is Thomas Paine. So let's get started. Paine was they're missing it again. Okay, guys, I cannot with this game. Paine was a political pamphleteer, originally from England. His book, Common Sense, was an argument for American independence and became one of the most popular books in American history, mainly because Americans thought it was a book about common sense, and on some level knew they needed it. At the time, most of the literature about independence was written by lawyers and politicians in the kind of self-important, florid language that can only be understood by college graduates or written by me. However, Common Sense lived up to its title. It was written in straightforward language, so basically anyone could understand its arguments, even people who couldn't read. The book was so popular there were numerous public readings of the text, making it an early audiobook in many ways. While the book wasn't what convinced Congress of the value of independence, they already knew, it did cause a groundswell of popular support, and that was important because Congress needed the public on their side, and they needed to convince soldiers to fight for them. Common Sense did both. I don't have any record of Connor actually meeting Paine, but I thought you'd like to know about him, as his works played such a crucial role in the Revolution. Yes, I put this at the end, so you'd read the whole thing before finding out. I can be a bastard that way. Alright, we're finished with Thomas. Next we have the Declaration of Independence. Liberty. Congress unanimously declares the United Colonies free and independent states. Yesterday, the representatives of all 13 colonies resolved and declared the independence of their citizens and formally dissolved all ties with Britain. This Declaration of Independence, as it is so entitled, was drafted by a committee of authors, principally Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin, and expresses in language more eloquent than we are able to describe the events and reasoning that have led to this final disruption. The Second Continental Congress began work on this document months ago. Some few among the representatives had every aspiration that the colonies would reconcile with the king and reasonable rights secured. With each additional regiment dispatched to these shores, that hope diminished until all voted in unanimity to serve ourselves from our mother country. John Adams declares this day should be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward, forevermore. And from is of course spelt F-O-R-M. How very stupid of me to read that incorrectly. Next, the Declaration of Independence. Date passed July 4th, 1776. You may have, or may not have heard of this one. This is the document in which the 13 colonies formally declared their independence from Britain. Congress voted to accept the Declaration on July 4th, 1776, celebrated today as Independence Day in the United States. Contrary to popular belief, the document wasn't actually signed on July 4th. The first signatures weren't added until the Declaration was formally transcribed, sometime around the beginning of August. Others were added as the delegates arrived in Philadelphia. By some accounts, the final signature wasn't added until sometime in 1777. The Declaration, with its statement that all men are created equal, and that they had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, became an inspiration for other revolutions that came after it, most notably the French Revolution, against the very government that supported the Americans in their bid for independence. Whoops. Next up, we can read about Independence Hall. This was built between the 1730s and 50s to be the Pennsylvania State House. The architecture was Georgian, which was popular at the time, and essentially means the building was made to look similar to English manor houses of its day. Georgian, of course, being a reference to King George. Some of the most important documents in the American Revolution came out of this building. The Declaration of Independence was first debated and signed here. The Constitution was drafted here, and if that weren't enough, the Liberty Bell rang in the bell tower to summon people to meetings before it cracked beyond repair, of course, and also before it was really known as the Liberty Bell, but we won't let that get in the way of a good story. The building became known as Independence Hall in the 1820s, a result of the Marquis de Lafayette making a return trip to the United States. Lafayette's visit was meant to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Revolution and to remind a new generation what had happened and where. It worked, creating a sense of national history and an obsession with tagging things with the words liberty, independence, freedom, and Washington. Alright, after that we have Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was one of George Washington's trusted advisors during the American Revolution, and the first Secretary of the Treasury of the United States. Hamilton was born in 1757 in the West Indies and was orphaned at the age of 11. However, his cleverness showed early, and his employers pooled their money to send him to university. Either that, or they just wanted him out of the building. Hamilton moved to New York in 1773 and began attending King's College, later Columbia University. By 1774, he was writing pro-rebel articles, not really in the spirit of attending somewhere named after the king, And by 75, he'd joined the volunteer militia. Again, probably not exactly what his sponsors had in mind when they sent him there. Hamilton fought during the occupation of New York in 76. He was a natural leader, and George Washington appointed him an aide-de-camp, a job he held for 5 years. However, Hamilton was eager to get back into battle, and in 1781 he commanded troops during the decisive victory at Yorktown. Hamilton became a member of Congress for New York. In 1788, he developed a particular fixation on the funding of the federal government, which at the time was, well, broke, as it wasn't allowed to demand any taxes from the member states. While that may sound wonderful when you're looking at your federal tax bill, it meant the government couldn't do things like pay their army. Soldiers like getting paid. In 1787, Hamilton was named the first Secretary of the Treasury, where he fought for a strong federal government in heated opposition with Thomas Jefferson, who prompted state rights. Hamilton was responsible for creating much of the foundation of the U.S. fiscal policy, the details of which are probably important, but so incredibly boring I can barely be bothered even to finish the sentence. But I did, because I care. Next up, we have a little addition to Thomas Hickey here. Let's go and find it. History tells us that Thomas Hickey was hanged for sedition in front of 20,000 troops as an example. That's an interesting interpretation of events, but since New York didn't have stadium seating at the time, I doubt many of the soldiers had a great view of the execution. The important message for them was, don't be a traitor, you'll get hanged. Not the niceties of who was on the gibbet. First, we can head home and visit our old friends. The seasons pass, but the threat lingers. When will we be free, brother? It's not so simple. You sound like the colonists. What do you mean? They are wise with words, using them to hide truth. I hide nothing from you. Still, perhaps I should take up arms. Perhaps we all should. No, that is not the way. You fight. Why not us? I fight so that no one else needs to. But I fear we do. For you are just one man. Tell me something. The other Keninkeaka side with the loyalists. Our village alone commits to no one, and you seem to favor the patriots. I favor only freedom. They have come to us, you know, the men in red coats. Their commanders have offered to secure our borders in exchange for service. You will make no such alliance. Then you would have us join the blue. I would have you stay out of conflict. You may wish for us to remain neutral, but I fear it cannot last. I fear for our future, brother. I will think on all you've said. Your words worry me. I should return to my duties. And that's all he has to say to us. We got a new database entry, Valley Forge, so we'll read that. Continental Army suffers deprivations. Encamped a scant 20 miles from Philadelphia, George Washington's army struggles in harsh winter. After the defeat at Brandywine, the Continental Army suffered humiliation as Congress fled Philadelphia in advance of Royal troops. The Redcoats subsequently marched upon and occupied our Patriot capital. Soon after, miseries were increased with the lamentable defeat at Germantown. General Washington has now located his army at a new place called Valley Forge, south of the Schuylkill River, where the high ground of Mounts Joy and Misery provide for easy defense. However, the Patriots must contend with starvation and want of clothing and shelter. Indeed, the general has set them to the building of huts with logs. He promises $12 to reward the party in each regiment which finishes their hut in the quickest and most workmanlike manner. But under several inches of snow, the soldiers are hard-pressed to complete their task. The lack of food and clothing has led to outbreak of disease, with many succumbing to dysentery and typhus. Indeed, hundreds have died among the some 11,000 troops. Only their undiminished loyalty to the cause of independence and to George Washington himself has kept them alive. The arrival of military advisor Frederick von Steuben to drill and train the men in correct formations and maneuvers, as well as the considerable numbers of wives and children that have joined the camp and who forage for food and wood, have considerably enlivened the general morale. You are returned to us, but not for long, I think. My work is not yet done. I wonder, will it ever be? The symbol that you sought and found, it is a mark of courage and honor, yes, but it promises pain and loss as well. I will bear such things gladly if it means you are all kept safe. You must not forget to look after yourself from time to time. When this is finished, when all are free, then I will rest. I hope that day comes soon. As do I. Do not let me keep you. Remember to look after yourself from time to time. After we're all done here, we can leave to trek through the winter to our first objective. While heading to our objective, we come across a bridge, and it gives us a database entry, the North Bridge. This was the site of one of the first skirmishes in the Revolutionary War. During the battle at Concord, about 90 British soldiers held this bridge, while several hundred rebel militiamen gathered on the hill nearby. The British were expecting resistance from disorganized farmers, so when the rebels advanced in a very military manner, the British panicked. Angry farmers are terrifying at the best of times. Officers gave conflicting orders. The British formations broke, and the soldiers ran away. The original bridge was torn down in 1788, and a new bridge was built nearby. Of course, it's been rebuilt several times. The image of the British turning tail is excellent fodder for historical reenactments, which Americans enjoy reenacting, but which never seem to reenact on our side of the Atlantic. Strange that. After a bit more travel, we find ourselves approaching our destination. An extremely fortified rebel outpost in the middle of the snow. Large trees that were made into spikes and put out to ward enemies away, prevent attackers from coming in too close. Militiamen walking all over the place. Little houses, fires. This is a very large area. But we have one man to speak to. That would be Mr. Washington himself. Sequence 9, missing supplies.
Commander. Connor. Any word on Lee? Not yet. My apologies. I've been distracted. Supply caravans meant for the camp have gone missing. I suspect treachery. A traitor named Benjamin Church, recently released from prison, has vanished as well. The two events are surely related.
What was his crime?
He was caught sending letters to the Loyalists, detailing our troop strength. He claimed it was a scare tactic, that we might avoid war. A poor lie.
I will find Church for you.
Why? What reason have you to help?
Does it matter?
As you wish. We've received reports of trouble along the southern road. Might be he's responsible. I suggest you begin your search there.
And with that, Benjamin Church gets an update. It turns out Church was either an excellent liar or he changed his allegiance from rebels back to British sometime before 1775. That's when he was caught sending coded messages to the British forces in Boston. Rather than being hanged for treason, Church was simply jailed and later exiled. That took some fast talking on his part. His defense was that he was actually helping the Continental Army by exaggerating troop estimates and gunpowder stores. That is some quick thinking. Lucky for Church, the Continental Army ever knew about one letter. More modern research has shown that he'd been ferrying papers to the British for some time, possibly to pay off his debts. Incidentally, his expensive mansion was seized by the newly formed American government and sold to pay off war debts. But not until after it was ransacked by angry rebels. That may seem like poetic justice, but it's somewhat unfair. At the time, Church wasn't even living there. He'd left it to his wife, who he'd abandoned for another woman. Seems he made a habit of betrayal. What a catch. Alright, and after church, we actually find another entry. The Continental Army. This was the army that George Washington led in the American Revolution, made up of various regiments supplied by the states. The army was officially established by the Continental Congress in June of 1775, shortly after the siege of Boston began. In fact, it was formed specifically to deal with the siege of Boston, which at the time was being carried out by the various militia who had fought at the battles of Lexington and Concord. The Continental Army was disbanded in 1783 after the Revolution was formally ended, possibly because people agreed the civilian militias were all the colonies needed to defend themselves, but possibly also because Congress couldn't afford to pay them. My money's on the last one. Next up, we have Valley Forge, date December 19th, 1777 to June 19th, 1778. This was the site of the winter encampment for the Continental Army in 1777 and 78. Valley Forge wasn't Washington's first choice of location. My first choice would have been the Bahamas, but apparently that's quite inconveniently located. The valley was mostly uninhabited, and he felt that would be easier to house and feed an army in a larger town. Congress, on the other hand, wanted the army nearby, keeping it between them in York and the British Army in Philadelphia. Valley Forge was close enough to Philadelphia to harass British troops there, but far enough away to prevent a surprise attack from the British. A life without surprises. What a thing to wish for. Washington did have a point, though. The army had trouble getting supplies, and Valley Forge had no housing for the troops. And even though that winter was mild, it was cold for an army where a third of soldiers didn't have any shoes. Mild temperatures also meant it was damp, so disease ran rampant. Thousands died. All of which makes Valley Forge sound like a disaster, but the astonishing thing is, it wasn't. The better equipped soldiers took the patrols. The others built houses. Nathaniel Greene was named quartermaster and found supplies. They invented subsistence rations for themselves when food ran low. Baron von Steuben and others arrived and began to drill the troops in military tactics and in basic camp layout and sanitation, helping stop the spread of disease. Far from being a catastrophe, it seemed, Valley Forge is legendary today as the proving ground of the American Army. I imagine it would be of little comfort to those who suffered there. Yes, you caught a terrible disease, but well done. You really proved yourself. The army emerged as a capable fighting force, though, winning a victory almost immediately at the Battle of Monmouth.
Ah, Connor. What do you think of my work thus far?
The men are bolstered, focused. It is good you have come.
You are too kind. Lord knows my journey was far from certain. The trials we suffered getting here were strange and many. I dressed as a woman, Connor, to evade British spies. Did you know that?
I did not. As a woman, you say?
It is the truth. King George had already stopped our crossing once in Bordeaux, threatening to seize my newly purchased ship, La Victoire, and arrest me. But I was born stubborn, and such a warning could not dissuade me. So we rode for Spain and bought passage aboard the ship there. George's spies had followed us every step of the way. Disguise was the only remaining option, mon Dieu.
No man can doubt your commitment, and you are invaluable to the cause. You did what you needed to do. I am certain I would have done the same.
But of course you would. I expect nothing less.
Marquis de Lafayette, better known as Lafayette. And it's not surprising, his full name was Marie-Joseph Paul Roch Gilbert du Montier, Marquis de Lafayette. His business card must have been 3 feet long. Lafayette was a French aristocrat and soldier who decided to join the Revolutionary War and become one of George Washington's most loyal supporters. I'm sure his friends just called him MJ. Lafayette came to the colonies in 1777, intent on joining the war effort. So intent, in fact, that he abandoned his post in the French army. When the French army found out his plans, the ship he intended to sail on was seized, and according to one story, Lafayette dressed in women's clothing to better stow away on another ship heading to the New World. We've all done it. Lafayette had been promised a place in the army before he left France, but once he arrived, Congress became worried that he was just a glory seeker. To smooth things over, Lafayette offered to work for free, and the ever thrifty Congress awarded him a commission as Major General. That may seem like a hefty rank for someone who wasn't quite 20 years old, but Lafayette was both rich and a French noble, and at the time Congress was hoping to secure more aid from the French government. It would have made me suspicious. There's no such thing as a free French. Lafayette was placed as an aide-de-camp to George Washington, probably because that's a French word, and it seemed to fit. And the two became good friends. Political connections aside, he was an excellent addition to the army. Lafayette was a natural leader. His first real fight was at the Battle of Brandywine, where he was wounded. Despite that, Lafayette organized and led an orderly retreat, which saved hundreds of lives. In 1779, Lafayette returned to France, where he negotiated for more troops to be sent to fight in the Revolution, exactly what Congress had hoped for when they hired him. After Lafayette returned to the colonies, he was placed in charge of the French troops and was responsible for chasing General Cornwallis into Yorktown. There were other people there too. It wasn't just one man chasing another into a town. That would have looked undignified. After the war, Lafayette returned to France, where he was a leader during the initial part of the French Revolution. Unfortunately for him, he advocated a constitutional monarchy and had to flee when that wasn't enough to satisfy the general populace. He returned to the United States in 1825 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Revolution, and was greeted by adoring crowds. In 2002, Lafayette was declared an honorary citizen of the United States, one of the 7 people who ever received that tribute. Arrogantly, Lafayette didn't even bother turning up for the ceremony. That's the French for ya. Now that that's all done, we can go to the destination that Washington was telling us about. It says return to the abandoned church, but I don't ever remember being there in the first place. But we'll go to the abandoned church either way.
Father. Connor, any last words? Wait. A poor choice. Come to check up on Church? Make sure he'd stolen enough for your British brothers?
Benjamin Church is no brother of mine. No more than the Redcoats or their idiot king. Oh, I expected naivete, but this... The Templars do not fight for the crown. We seek the same as you, boy. Freedom, justice, independence.
But
But what?
Johnson, Pitcairn, Hickey, they sought to steal land, to sack towns, to murder George Washington.
Johnson sought to own the land, that we might keep it safe. Pitcairn aimed to encourage diplomacy, which you cocked up thoroughly enough to start a goddamn war. And Hickey? George Washington is a wretched leader. He's lost nearly every battle in which he's taken part. The man's racked with uncertainty and insecurity. Only look at Valley Forge to know my words are true. We're all better off without him. Look, much as I'd love to spar with you, Benjamin Church's mouth is as big as his ego. You clearly want the supplies he's stolen. I want him punished. Our interests are aligned.
What do you propose?
A truce. Perhaps some time together might do us good. You are my son, after all, and might still be saved from your ignorance. I can kill you now, if you prefer. Excellent. Shall we be off?
Do you even know where Benjamin Church has gone?
I'm afraid not. I'd hoped to ambush him when he or one of his men returned here. It seems I'm too late. They've come and cleared the place out.
I may be able to track him.
Working with Papa? What?
There was a wagon here, slowly weighed down as they loaded the supplies.
Alright, Sherlock. Oh, great. British troops marching around. Maybe they'll run into Valley Forge. Them and their drums. I mean, I understand why the drums are there. I just feel like it's a little telling when your guys are coming closer to battle.
Snow has obscured the tracks, but enough remains that we can still follow.
How do we know those weren't the, 13 troops that just walked by straight over the same tracks? Okay, Daddy, this is what we were trying to avoid. Next time, hide behind the tree. After we get done taking care of the guards, we can move along.
Just my luck. Going to freeze to death if I don't get this fixed.
Are you Ben Church's man?
Well played.
The old straightforward tactic. Well, I'll go and get him. You know, you can stay by the supplies, I suppose. Oh, I guess he's following. Get him!
It was not wise to run.
What do you want?
Where is Benjamin Church?
I don't know. We was riding for a camp just north of here. It's where we normally unload the cargo. Maybe you'll find him there.
Enough of that.
You did not have to kill him.
Let's not waste time with all this pointless banter. Go catch up with the rest of Church's men. Infiltrate that camp of theirs and see what you can discover.
And what about you?
Never you mind. Just do as I ask.
I mean, come on, we're already suspicious of you. Tell me your plan. Getting close, we see that two men are driving a cart. Luckily, it's filled with some sort of grass.
A bit of gunpowder in those crates. We'll get extra for that. Aye, Church will be pleased and we'll be rich. I almost feel bad for the Yanks, shivering and starving out there. It's a hard way to go. All they need to do is raise the white flag. They should have done that a long time ago. All this fight serves no purpose. The Crown's sure to win in the end. You waste all those lives chasing a fool nation.
After a little bit of travel, these guys arrive at their destination.
Alright, looks to be in order. Go and see the foreman. There's another run planned for tonight. I'll go bring the rest.
Oi, where's the foreman?
Center camp, near the tree. Can't miss it.
Thank you kindly.
You won't be thanking me when you hear what he's got planned.
About time you showed up. Listen here. Boss wants us to try something new tonight. A raid. No more convoys. We're to steal from the Yank camp itself.
Valley Forge.
That's right.
You sure about this?
It's not my business to be sure or not sure. I just do as Church asks. If you're so concerned, take it up with him.
Is he here?
Of course not. Hiding in New York, the last I heard. Trying to keep a low profile. What, on account of him not wanting to go back to jail and all?
All right, I'm in.
Look what we found.
He was creeping around the camp all suspicious-like.
Must be a Yank spy.
Nah, he's something else. Something special. Isn't that right, Hatham? Church told me all about you.
Then you should know better than this.
You're not really in a position to be making threats, are ya?
Not yet.
Holy crap, lots of these guys showed up.
Once you've dealt with these louts, meet me in New York.
What? You mean to just leave? Now?
If you can't handle a couple of mercenaries, then we've really no business working together.
Unbelievable.
Yep, I'd have to agree with Connor on this one. It's pretty low. After that mess is all done and we're content with looting, we can go to New York. 1 month later, we arrive in New York. Now, something happens here. These two gentlemen happen to be Washington and another man. And if we approach them, they start arguing. Connor says, "How dare you approach me after Monmouth?" And Washington says, "I don't have any other choice." But I did it, and then I realized that we didn't do any of that yet, so for whatever reason, this is out of sequence as like a side quest. So I'm going to skip it, and I'm going to try and put it in better order for later. So this might be a little bit weird, but we'll see later. After doing some good by the citizens and exploring New York, we find King's College. First opened on the first floor of Trinity School in 1754, but it moved to the building that you see here in 1760. This building survived the fire in 1776, but it wasn't being used as a school at the time. It had been shut down under the orders of the Continental Army and turned into a hospital. It didn't open again until the war ended, when it was given a new name, Columbia College. Another example of the word king falling out of favor among Americans. Unless it involves burgers, of course, which just sums up you people. The college stayed here until the mid-19th century when it moved to Midtown. The building's cornerstone was moved to the new location, but the rest was torn down and the land underneath it was sold at a tidy profit, which is the history of much of downtown New York. We can do ourselves a favor and synchronize with some of these viewpoints around New York to open up our map and just take in the sights. After that, we defended a farmer against some British occupants, we'll call them.
If you could spare a bite, beat us for begging.
But then we run across Bridewell Prison. By 1773, the prison population at the New Gaol was getting so large that the city began plans for a new prison. Bridewell started in 1773. The building was finished in 75, but before it was saw much use, the war happened, and the British started to fill it with American POWs. Prison conditions were terrible. Imagine a budget hotel, then take away the budget. There was very little food, most of it bad. There were no window panels, just bars over openings in the walls. One prisoner wrote that in 3 winter months, the only fire he saw was in the lanterns on the streets. This was before our 2.5 centuries of global warming, so you can imagine how cold it was. When the war ended, this building went back to its intended use. That would be holding local criminals and debtors. I can only hope the new government eventually installed windows and started work on the catering. The building was torn down in 1838, and the stones were used to build a new prison that went by the happy nickname of the Tombs, which wasn't nearly as glamorous as it sounds. It's been the pet name of every Manhattan jail since. After helping out that kid get some food, we can find another viewpoint to synchronize with. And another. And before we get to the next one, we find St. Paul's Chapel. This chapel opened in 1766 as an extension of Trinity Church, which is slightly further down Broadway. Unlike Trinity Church, St. Paul's was saved from the Great Fire by local bucket brigades. The original building still stands today, making it one of the oldest churches in Manhattan. During the Revolution, St. Paul's was known for loyalist leanings. It's Episcopalian, which is a subset of Anglican, which you'll remember is the Church of England. You can probably guess whose side they were on. Church services specifically prayed for the king and royal family, which you can imagine wasn't too popular with the revolutionaries who were occupying the town in 76. After the war ended, there was a turnabout in the church's politics. The rector and some of the more loyalist congregants left New York, and it became more patriot-friendly. George Washington attended a service here on his inauguration day, and kept attending while he lived in New York, which probably went a long way toward repairing the church's reputation among the patriot population. While on our way to our next viewpoint, we get another database entry, this time for the Old Royal Exchange. This was the first covered market in New York. It started as a one-story building in 1675, but it was replaced with the building you see here in 1752. The lowest floor is for the market, and the second floor contains rooms that could be used for concerts, public meetings, and balls. Balls as in dances, not just a big room full of balls. It's no accident that this building bears a resemblance to Faneuil Hall in Boston. It was common architecture for markets at the time. Private houses didn't have the space for large numbers of people, so these buildings combined open space for a market with closed-in space for the upper crust to have fancy parties. Of course, public rooms could be used by the rabble as well. The Sons of Liberty brought crowds here, notably to choose delegates for the Second Continental Congress. Technically, that was the New York Assembly's job, but they'd refused to send anyone. After the Revolutionary War ended, this building was the first home of the Supreme Court. Its first session began on February 2nd, 1790. It didn't stay here for long, however, and moved to Philadelphia in 1791. After we get done with our viewpoints, we stumble upon Fort George. This fort has seen several name changes. It started off in 1625 as Fort Amsterdam, protecting the original Dutch settlement of New Amsterdam. Since then, it's been known as Fort James and Fort William, before changing sex to Fort Anne and swapping back in the 18th century to Fort George. When the Revolutionary War ended, Fort George was torn down, perhaps predictably, given that this latest name was in honor of King George. Should really have stuck with Fort Anne. Everybody loves an Anne. Well, I think we've explored New York plenty for now, and I think that's where we'll end things. I'd like to thank everyone so much for watching, if you did make it this far, and please do comment. I'd like to respond to them. I do respond to them. Whether it's just a thumbs up, or I actually type back, I do respond. Please consider subscribing if you liked the video, and tell me what you'd like to see next time. And if you wanna, go ahead and give it a thumbs up if you liked the video, or a thumbs down if you didn't. But if you do give it a thumbs down, please do tell me your reasoning, and maybe we can work on that here. I'm always looking to improve these videos. That being said, I like to play video games, and I just post these because that's what I like to do. But anyways, I'd like to wish everyone a great day, night, whatever, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.